The Ottoman soldiers were hardened men. These weren't recruits. These were veterans who had stormed Constantinople, crossed the Danube a dozen times, watched cities burn. But when they rode toward the Wallachian capital in the summer of 1462, they stopped. In front of them, stretching for almost 2 miles, was a forest. Not trees, people, 20,000 of them, impaled on stakes rotting in the summer heat, arranged in the shape of a crescent around the city walls. Mothers, soldiers, children, all of them up there. The Sultan, Mehmed II, the man who had personally conquered Constantinople, looked at what was in front of him. And then he turned his army around and went home. The man who built that forest wasn't a demon. He wasn't a monster from a story. He was a prince, a Christian prince, and he believed that what he was doing was necessary. That's the part that's hard to sit with. Drawn from history. Vlad was born somewhere around 1431 in Wallachia, a small principality in what's now Romania, wedged between two powers that could swallow it whole at any moment. Hungary to the north, the Ottoman Empire to the south. His father, Vlad II, was trying to survive that squeeze. He joined an elite Christian order called the Order of the Dragon, Dracul in Romanian, which made him Dracul, the dragon, and his son became Dracula, son of the dragon. That's where the name comes from. Not folklore, not darkness, a knighthood. But here's where things get complicated fast. Vlad's father needed Hungarian support to keep his throne. Then he needed Ottoman support when the Hungarians turned on him. He played both sides, because in Wallachia, that's what surviving looked like. And one day in 1442, the Ottomans called in their favor. They invited Vlad's father to court in Adrianople, and they kept 2 of his sons as insurance. Vlad was somewhere between 11 and 14 years old. His little brother Radu was around 7. They would stay there for 5 years. Ottoman captivity wasn't a dungeon. It was something more complicated than that. The Turks wanted useful vassals, not broken hostages, so they educated these boys, taught them Turkish, warfare, statecraft. Vlad learned fluent Turkish. He got to know the future Sultan Mehmed personally. They were close in age, and in some ways they had similar minds. Both were obsessed with centralized power. Both were willing to go further than anyone around them. But the experience hit the brothers differently. Radu adapted, charmed people, made friends, built relationships at the Ottoman court. He became a favorite of the young Mehmed, and eventually Radu would fight for the Turks, against his own brother, against his own people. Vlad went the other way entirely. He was whipped regularly. He watched and seethed. And somewhere in those years, something calcified inside him, a fury that would never fully cool down. Then in 1447, word reached them. Their father had been murdered by Wallachian nobles. Their older brother Mircea had been blinded with hot irons and buried alive. Vlad was 16, maybe 17, and his entire family was gone. The Ottomans released him in 1448 with a small force in the expectation that he'd take the Wallachian throne and deliver it to them. It lasted 2 months. He was chased out by a stronger rival and he ran, first to Moldavia, then to Transylvania, living in the courts of men who had every reason to want him dead, surviving on whatever alliances he could patch together. For 8 years, he moved like a ghost through the political edges of Eastern Europe, learning, watching, waiting. And in 1456, he finally came back with Hungarian backing, tracked down the man who had helped murder his father, challenged him to a personal duel, single combat, winner takes Wallachia, and killed him. That was Vlad's opener. It only got darker from there. In the previous 40 years, there had been 12 different rulers. These boyar families would back whoever suited them that week, then flip again. They had killed his father. They had let his brother be buried alive, and now they were sitting across from him at dinner, acting like none of that had happened. Vlad invited 200 of them to an Easter feast. After the meal, his men moved through the hall. The older boyars were dragged outside and impaled on stakes beyond the city walls. The younger ones were marched in chains 50 miles north to a ruined fortress, Poenari, and forced to rebuild it by hand. Most of them didn't survive the construction. Was it monstrous? Yes. Was it also a move that worked? Also yes. The boyar revolving door stopped. Nobody else tried to flip on him. For the next 6 years, Vlad ran Wallachia with an iron grip, and by many accounts, regular people, peasants, merchants, were safer than they'd ever been. There's a story, probably true, about a golden cup placed at a public fountain in the capital. Vlad left it there as a test. Nobody stole it. Not in his kingdom. Not while he was watching. But then there were the Saxons. The Saxon merchant towns in Transylvania, Brasov, Sibiu, had economic interests that didn't align with Vlad's policies. When he started restricting their trade, they pushed back. And when they pushed back, Vlad crossed into their territory and burned it. Villages, fields, anyone caught in the open. The Saxons had something Vlad didn't: access to the printing press, and they used it. Pamphlets started circulating across Germany. Woodcut illustrations showed Vlad eating breakfast surrounded by forests of impaled bodies, dipping his bread in their blood, boiling children, cutting off limbs for sport. Some of it was true, a lot of it was exaggerated, some of it was pure invention, but it spread, it sold, and somewhere in those woodcuts the man became a myth. The propaganda was so effective that when the King of Hungary, Vlad's supposed ally, needed to justify imprisoning him in 1462, he held up those letters and pamphlets as evidence that Vlad had secretly defected to the Ottomans. Most historians think those documents were forged, but they did the job. Vlad spent the next 14 years in Hungarian custody. While he sat in that castle, the stories just kept getting darker. Here's what actually happened in 1462 before he was captured. When Mehmed's army of roughly 90,000 men crossed the Danube to take Wallachia, Vlad had maybe 30,000. And a lot of those were peasant conscripts. There was no scenario where he wins that fight head on, so he didn't try. He burned his own crops. He poisoned the wells. He diverted rivers to create marshland that slowed the Ottoman advance. He sent infected people into the Turkish camps. And every night, his cavalry hit the Ottoman camps in the darkness, dragged men away and impaled them before dawn, so the Turks would find them in the morning. Vlad had grown up with these men. He spoke their language. He knew their signals, their passwords. On the night of June 17th, he personally led 7,000 cavalry directly toward Mehmed's tent, his men dressed as Ottoman soldiers, calling out the correct passwords in Turkish. They got deep into the camp before the alarm was raised. They killed the wrong tent, 2 viziers, not the Sultan. And by the time they found the right one, the Janissaries had formed a wall of bodies around it. He didn't get Mehmed. He lost the night attack, but the psychological damage was done. Then came the forest of the impaled, 20,000 bodies outside the capital, and Mehmed went home. Vlad had essentially won against a 90,000-man army through sheer psychological force. And then his own people turned against him. They were exhausted. Their land was ash. And his brother Radu arrived with Ottoman gold and offered peace. It didn't take long. Vlad came back one last time in 1476. He was in his mid-40s by then. He had a Hungarian wife, 2 sons, a respectable position at court, somehow become almost rehabilitated in the eyes of Christian Europe. He lasted less than 2 months. The exact circumstances of his death are genuinely unclear. He was killed near Bucharest sometime in late 1476 or early 1477, ambushed or assassinated, or possibly killed by his own men in the confusion of battle while dressed as a Turk, which would be almost too perfect. His head was taken to Mehmed in Constantinople, displayed on a spike, and his body nobody knows for sure. The monks at Snagov Monastery supposedly buried him there, on a small island in a lake. Archaeologists dug up the chapel floor in the 20th century. What they found was inconclusive. The man who left 20,000 bodies outside his city, who poisons wells and burned his own kingdom to stop an empire, has a grave that nobody can locate. There's something almost appropriate about that. 400 years after Vlad died, an Irish writer named Bram Stoker was researching Eastern European folklore. He came across a book that described a Wallachian prince called Dracula. He took the name, built a count around it. Pale, ageless, castle in the mountains, drinks blood. He never visited Romania. He never read the real story carefully. And ironically, the fictional Dracula is far less terrifying than the actual man. The actual man was a hostage who came back, a son who watched his family get erased and then spent 30 years making sure it never happened again. A ruler who used fear the way other rulers used armies, precisely, deliberately, with a clear understanding of what it cost and what it bought. Was he a monster? Almost certainly by any modern definition. Was he also in some dark and uncomfortable way effective? Wallachia didn't fall to the Ottomans on his watch. That question doesn't have a clean answer, and maybe that's why the name won't go away. Not because of the vampire, because of the man. The man with the stake who looked at an empire and didn't blink. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please subscribe and leave a like. You can also write in the comments which historical topics you'd like to see next. See you in the next video.